Hello and welcome to Lukmaan IAS. So in this video we will be talking about the semiconductor ecosystem in India. अब सेमीकंडक्टर की बात करते हैं तो सेमीकंडक्टर एक ऐसा मटेरियल होता है जिसमें बोथ प्रॉपर्टी होती है, प्रॉपर्टी ऑफ बोथ मेटल्स एज वेल एज नॉन मेटल्स. तो अगर बेसिक सेमीकंडक्टर की बात करें तो वो एलिमेंट्स जिनको हम केमिस्ट्री में पढ़ते हैं मेटलॉइड्स. एंड जब मेटलॉइड्स की बात होती है, टू मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट सेमीकंडक्टर एलिमेंट्स आर सिलिकॉन एंड जर्मेनियम. सिलिकॉन एंड जर्मेनियम. अब द टेक्नोलॉजी इज मूविंग टू दैट पॉइंट वेयर इट्स नॉट अबाउट हाउ मच metallic resources a country has. It's all about how much semiconductor ecosystem a country can create, whether extraction of those material and also processing it into certain usable form. And one usable form is chip or integrated circuits, semiconductor components. And because of the deep technology which is taking place, the way the world is digitizing the use of electronic gadgets, it has become even more pertinent. So in this video we'll be talking about India's ecosystem. We'll also compare the global scenario and we'll see whether India has certain drivers, the challenges and opportunities which India possess. So let's start the video. So first, if we talk about the context, recently under the India Semiconductor Mission, which is the flagship mission for promoting the semiconductor ecosystem in India, the government of India has approved 3 or 4 new semiconductor manufacturing plants, 2 in Odisha, 1 in Punjab in Mohali and 1 in Andhra Pradesh, Tirupati. And that makes up to 10 semiconductor manufacturing plants. That would be spread out in 6 states. So that is the context, and why India is going towards this push towards semiconductor fabrication, semiconductor wafer manufacturing. We'll be talking about the need first. So the need which is there is, we need to know why semiconductor is very important. So the first thing is, the government of India is pushing towards digitization. The world is getting connected. In India, we have seen the way Digital India mission has progressed, the way smartphone penetration and the way internet has penetrated. Now it's all about people using those devices, not just smartphone. If you talk about wearable devices, those smart watches, now we are talking about smart lens, smart you can say specs which are coming around. So these things make that we need to make sure that we have our own ecosystem to design, develop and manufacture these products within India rather than being reliant on other countries. Then automation. With the coming up of Industry 4.0, Industry 4.0 or the 4th industrial revolution, every manufacturing process would get integrated technologically. There would be electronic based command system, and the humans and machines would get integrated together as far as production process is concerned. And there we know that the role of integrated circuits, chips, whatsoever we say as in common parlance chips, it becomes ever more so important. Then we have seen the Internet of Things which is coming up across. Now smart switches, our home appliances getting connected together. We know that everything works on electronics, and whenever we talk about electronics, we need to have those component manufacturing taking place within the domestic territory, else we are getting dependent on certain imports. And the way the world is reacting in terms of the closing of economy and protectionist measure, it becomes very important for countries like India to have their own end-to-end electronics as well as semiconductor design, development as well as manufacturing ecosystem. Then economic significance. We have seen that the jobs at the upper end, if we talk about high quality jobs, high value added jobs, in the service sector we have global capability centers which are research based jobs, or which are tech driven jobs. But in case of manufacturing, we need to leap forward towards deep tech manufacturing, where electronics manufacturing, semiconductor design and development, even the space economy that comes into picture, then these things get supports only if we have component manufacturing within India that creates high quality jobs and that has higher sustainability in terms of the job longevity. It means कि जब job होगा वो easily replace नहीं हो पाएगा, क्योंकि जब the way AI is replacing many of the jobs, it becomes very important for India to enter high value manufacturing. The national security. We have seen that we are talking about the 6th generation or 5th generation aircrafts. We are talking about best quality radar system. All these things requires best quality electronics, and for those best quality electronics we need to have the backbone of semiconductor manufacturing ecosystem within India. And the way we have seen in the Operation Sindoor that many of those things which were used, it was pinpoint. How this pinpoint precision is made sure? It is all through best quality programming which is done, best quality integrated circuits which are designed, and that leads to integration of our defense capability with the electronic manufacturing ecosystem which we need to create within India. And then tech sovereignty. We have seen during कोविड के समय हमने देखा होगा जब वैक्सीन्स हम नहीं बना पा रहे थे तो जो डेवलप्ड इकोनॉमी थे उन्होंने एक वैक्सीन का एक नेशनलिज्म क्रिएट किया. द टर्म विच बिकेम वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट वाज वैक्सीन नेशनलिज्म, जहाँ पे जो डेवलप्ड इकोनॉमी थे उन्होंने पहले बोला कि वी विल नॉट शेयर आवर रिसर्च, आवर R&D विथ मेनी ऑफ द कंट्रीज लाइक इंडिया. Imagine the same scenario. We know that most of the electronics and most of the semiconductor manufacturing takes place in countries like South Korea, countries like Taiwan, in China, in US. So there could be a scenario where these countries may stop sharing their technology with India. So it is very important for India to enter into those big game manufacturing, else what would happen that with the rise of protectionism, with the rise of deglobalization, with the rise of straining of ties between countries, it would become very difficult for India to grow into in different domains of manufacturing. For example, अगर हम बात करें automobiles की, अभी recently जब 2021 में global chip shortage हुआ था, ग्लोबल चिप शॉर्टेज में क्या हुआ था कि चिप्स जो इंटीग्रेटेड सर्किट्स है उसका डिमांड इतना ज़्यादा था बिकॉज ऑफ रिजम्पशन ऑफ सप्लाई, रिजम्पशन ऑफ मैन्युफैक्चरिंग एक्टिविटी, उतना डेवलपमेंट हो नहीं पा रहा था, उतना सप्लाई को मेंटेन नहीं किया जा रहा था. अब इससे कारण क्या हुआ कि इंडिया का जो ऑटोमोबाइल सेक्टर है वो एक स्टैग्नेशन देख रहा था. क्यों? क्योंकि आप जितने भी ऑटोमोबाइल्स, जितने भी कार्स हम देखते हैं, एवरीथिंग इज इंटीग्रेटेड थ्रू इलेक्ट्रॉनिक कंट्रोल यूनिट, ECU से कनेक्टेड रहता है. एवरीथिंग इज क्वाइट कनेक्टेड. वी हैव सीन ऑटोमेटिक क्लाइमेट कंट्रोल, AC जो कंट्रोल करते हैं, या फिर हमारा असिस्टेड ड्राइविंग होते हैं, जितने भी इट इज कंट्रोल थ्रू इलेक्ट्रॉनिक सर्किटरी. अब एक छोटा सा अगर कॉम्पोनेंट हमारे पास नहीं रहेगा तो क्या होगा, पूरा ऑटोमोबाइल इंडस्ट्री एक स्टैंड स्टिल पोजीशन पे चली जाएगी. सिमिलरली अभी हमने देखा था क्रिटिकल मिनरल्स में चाइना ने एक एडवांस मैग्नेट्स मूव हमारे से सप्लाई करना रिस्ट्रिक्शन कर दिया था, जिससे ऑटोमोबाइल इंडस्ट्री को फिर से प्रॉब्लम हुआ था. लाइकवाइज देयर आर मेनी अदर इंडस्ट्रीज विच आर ऑल्सो डिपेंडेंट ऑन दिस इंटीग्रेटेड सर्किट्स, एंड दैट इज वाई फॉर टेक सॉवरेंटी वी नीड टू हैव दैट डेवलपमेंट, दैट इकोसिस्टम टू बी डेवलप्ड एंड टू एंड विद इन इंडिया. अब थोड़ा इकोनॉमी की बात करें, थोड़ा मार्केट की बात करें. सो इफ यू टॉक अबाउट द ग्लोबल सिनेरियो इन टर्म्स ऑफ सेमीकंडक्टर इंडस्ट्री, सो द मार्केट इटसेल्फ इज currently $700 billion overall within whole world. जितना हम consumption है for the semiconductor, I'm not talking about the electronics. Electronics is more than $4 trillion. But the backbone होता है ना, पीछे का green chip जो हम देखते हैं, the green circuitries जो हम देखते हैं, ये this is the semiconductor part. Semiconductor इसमें ये होता है, ये base होता है, इसको बेस को वेफर भी कहते हैं, जिसके ऊपर इलेक्ट्रॉनिक्स IC कंपोनेंट्स लगे रहते हैं. सो दीज आर द कंपोनेंट्स विच आर एम्बेडेड ऑन दोज चिप्स, एंड दैट इज व्हाट मेक्स अप द माइक्रो प्रोसेसर और द इंटीग्रेटेड सर्किट और द ग्राफिक प्रोसेसिंग यूनिट, GPUs. और यही चीज होते हैं बैकबोन. दिस इज द मेमोरी, दिस इज द ब्रेन ऑफ एनी पर्टिकुलर डिवाइस विच इज इलेक्ट्रॉनिक गैजेट. अब अगर इसकी बात करें, टोटल जो इस सर्किटरी और इस पूरा सेमीकंडक्टर का मार्केट है, दैट इज $700 billion करेंटली ग्लोबली, and that is projected to reach to round about $2 trillion. So that is a jump of more than 3 times within a gap of 7 years. अब इस इकोसिस्टम में इंडिया का क्या रोल है, we'll talk about that thing in the next slide. And because we know that whenever we talk about semiconductor, Taiwan is one country which comes into picture. Taiwan manufactures more than 60% of global chip production. And to add to that, the designing and other manufacturing takes place in countries like South Korea, China, and some development takes place. Most of the design takes place in countries like United Kingdom, or you talk about Intel, you talk about US companies, Nvidia, which is coming up, which is becoming very much important because of the age of AI and their processor becoming even so more important. So that is why India does not find itself anywhere in the global value chain of electronics and semiconductor. It is very important for India to enter this global value chain of semiconductor. Rather than just assembling things, we need to manufacture those semiconductor components, and that is why India Semiconductor Mission, we will be talking about the mission, we will be talking about different policy initiatives which have been taken by the government, and that is very important for India to enter that chain, that supply nodes, so as to make sure that they are also considered to be very important if the global semiconductor process has to take place. अगर ग्लोबली अगर पूरा प्रोडक्शन हो रहा है तो इंडिया का भी अपना एक इम्पॉर्टेंट रोल होना चाहिए, rather than just an importer of those components or finished integrated circuits. अब अगर इंडिया की बात करें, obviously we have seen how the market of semiconductor has grown, and it is synonymous with the growth of digitization in India. And if you talk about the current market size, it is roughly 50 billion USD, and it is projected to increase to 100 billion USD in the next 5 years. So there is a process that India would be consuming far more semiconductor equipment, semiconductor chips, semiconductor components, and that is very pertinent for India to start developing, start manufacturing these things within India's domestic territory. And that is why there are under the mission, the Indian Semiconductor Mission, we have seen that many of the projects have been sanctioned. The government has invited many tech companies like Micron, like TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, the Tata Electronics, Foxconn, the contract manufacturer from Taiwan. All these companies are now setting up in India their plants in India, either through joint venture, and they are getting support through India Semiconductor Mission, which is roughly 76,000 crores mission. Now, if you talk about what are the drivers for India, India में ही क्यों, India क्या ऐसा opportunity present करता है और या क्या इस तरह के drivers हैं? First is large talent pool. If you talk about 20% of design engineers, what are who are design engineers? Those who design the semiconductor integrated circuits. किस तरह का circuitry होगा, what would be the components, the nanometer scale, whatsoever is the design that we say, the IC design. 20% of the design engineers are Indians. So as far as the talent pool which we are concerned, we have that talent pool within India also, and they are serving in different other companies which are located outside India. So we have that technology, you can say spread out, which can be done through these people if they come as trainers within India. Then rise of global capability centers. अब semiconductor का manufacturing ही बस, that is not very important. The ecosystem, the back end ecosystem and the forward ecosystem, उसका भी connect होना चाहिए. हमारे we need to have that tech support system, and we know that India is one of the pioneers. India is the go-to place when we talk about these global capability centers. अभी एक वीडियो में मैंने भी शेयर किया था, 50% of the global capability centers are located within India, and that shows that we have that tech people to support this development. Semiconductor is a manufacturing thing, but we need to have that service support which has to come from within India, and GCC comes into picture. Then diminishing digital divide. We have heard this thing between rural and urban, there is a digital divide because the way internet penetration has happened. However, in the past 2-3 years, specifically with the coming up of 5G by the telecom companies, this penetration, this divide has got diminished. Now अगर हम internet की बात करें, there are more than billion subscribers on internet, there are more than 50 crore users, there are more than 50-60 crore smartphone users. तो हमारा जो digital usage है, digital equipments, digital gadgets का जो consumption है, वो बस that is not just limited to urban areas. अब rural area में people are buying things, they are buying those electronic music system, they are buying those gadgets, they are buying those smart bands. So this is, and they are also buying those remote controlled, voice controlled those electronic equipments like AC, fridge and all these things. And that is why the demand is now broad based, and this is an important, you can say, push that acts like a pusher, that okay, if these things start manufactured within India, we have that domestic market to support that consumption. किसी भी कंट्री में किसी भी चीज़ का मैन्युफैक्चरिंग तभी सपोर्ट हो सकता है अगर उनका डोमेस्टिक कंजम्पशन उसको सपोर्ट करे. If we are manufacturing steel based outputs, like say steel is finished steel, it has to have market within India. अब semiconductor का भी हमने देखा, the market is going like anything. The electronics market, if we talk about, which is the major consumption of semiconductor, it is currently around about 200 billion USD and it is projected to reach up to 500 billion USD by 2030. तो इसमें semiconductor का अपना एक ecosystem gets developed. Now if we talk about the opportunity, so we have seen this, okay, these are the drivers, these are the market conditions in as far as global scenario is concerned or the Indian scenario is concerned. The opportunity which India presents is, we need to ensure that we reduce this import dependence. We have been the manufacturers of electronics. As far as PLI scheme in electronics is concerned, it's a hit. We are manufacturing, we are the smartphone, now we are exporters of smartphone. Recently Apple exported most of its smartphone from India to United States before those tariffs came into picture. But what about semiconductor? The backbone, उसका जो back end होता है, semiconductor, we are still dependent on import. If you talk about the total, as we told you, the market share is 50 billion USD, most of them are dependent on imports. हमारा domestic manufacturing is not very high. Apart from some of those component manufacturing which is done by certain PSUs like BEL, BEL, which is supplying certain electronics semiconductor parts to defense PSUs. Apart from that, we do not have very good ecosystem as far as semiconductor manufacturing within India is concerned. So there is a huge import dependency that has to be reduced. Apart from that, there is a potential to attract foreign direct investments. As we have seen that in 2013, if you go back, electronics ecosystem कैसे create हुआ था? We had electronics manufacturing clusters, specs scheme आया था जिससे there were many companies like Xiaomi, a mobile company, a giant, Samsung from Korea, they started shifting their bases to India. LG came into picture, and now we have full-fledged electronics manufacturing, not just assembling. Core component manufacturing happens to be in India. Even the display manufacturing is happening within India. In the same manner, we need to make sure that the heart of things, the brain of these things needs the IC, the GPUs, the electronic semiconductor components needs to get manufactured within India, and through what? Through FDIs. We need to invite those pioneers, the Micron industry, TSMC, SMC. So these have to come to India to set up their factories through joint ventures or through subsidiaries, so that this ecosystem gets started within India. Then creating domestic electronics value chain. अभी तक हमारा जितना भी वैल्यू चेन इलेक्ट्रॉनिक्स में है, दैट इज असेंबलिंग और पोस्ट सेमीकंडक्टर्स जब हम इंपोर्ट कर लेते हैं उसके आगे का हमारा प्रोसेस स्टार्ट होता है. एंड टू एंड इलेक्ट्रॉनिक्स, राइट फ्रॉम डिजाइन टिल कस्टमर एंड, दैट इज एंड टू एंड. क्या होगा? डिजाइनिंग टिल प्रोडक्शन, sales, and then service comes into picture after sales service. We are doing this thing, but what about design? We need to design the electronics component, we need to design the semiconductor components. The government of India has a dedicated scheme, that is design linked incentive, DLI scheme, which is a part of India semiconductor mission, to create our own indigenous chips, indigenous integrated circuits, so that based on that platform we can also say okay, we also have certain company which is comparable to Nvidia, which is comparable to this AMD, Intel. We need to create our own Intel, our own Nvidia. So that is why it is very important, the design part and the semiconductor part, which is very important. And strategic partnership. We do not need to create things from our own. अब एक होता है कि हम indigenous model follow करेंगे, we will keep on researching, हम अपना indigenous R&D करेंगे. That would take so much amount of time that we will miss the bus of this electronics ecosystem which is getting developed around the world. We need to have this strategic partnerships with the pioneers like Taiwan, like South Korea, Singapore, even United States of America. They have this Intel, Nvidia. We need to first make sure that we have that partnership. We need to first understand the technology, then we should think about technology transfer, and then we should go about the indigenization of technology. This would make sure that the ecosystem gets developed right at the onset rather than it will take some time. अगर खुद से जाएंगे करने के लिए, it will take many more years. If you talk about the challenges, obviously there are very huge challenges. The challenge itself, the first challenge is high capital cost and long gestation. It means if we have this is known as fab units, semiconductor fabrication unit. The manufacturing plant is known as fabrication plant. The fab unit, the cost which is invested, or the investment amount which is needed for setting up a fab unit is very high. At the same time, it takes so much time. It takes time, at least 3 or 4 years, to reach that level of you can say precision before commercially usable electronic circuitry can be rolled out from that particular fabrication unit. And that is why it is a time-taking task and also very risky as far as capital investment is concerned. Then infrastructure gap. अब वहाँ पर the level of cleanliness, if we talk about in those fab units is tremendous. हमारा वहाँ का आसपास का ecosystem को ऐसा clear ensure करना पड़ता है, top notch facilities देना पड़ता है, electricity supply should be reliable like anything. Apart from that, the road connectivity, everything has to be more streamlined. अगर हम इलेक्ट्रॉनिक सर्किटरी की बात करें ना, उसमें मेनी मोर इक्विपमेंट्स आर देयर, छोटे छोटे कंपोनेंट्स होते हैं. वी नीड टू क्रिएट दो सप्लाई चेन, वेंडर मैनेजमेंट मेंटेन करना है, हमारा लॉजिस्टिक्स शुड बी वेरी साउंड बिकॉज वी कैन नॉट कीप ऑन स्टोरिंग मेनी ऑफ दीज कंपोनेंट्स. ट्रांजिस्टर्स, रेजिस्टर्स, छोटे छोटे चीज़ें होती हैं जिसको हमको स्टोर करना होता है. एंड वी नीड टू क्रिएट दैट सप्लाई चेन, एंड दैट नीड्स टू हैव jacked up infrastructure, that needs to be more tech driven logistics which come into picture. Then supply chain restrictions, especially critical minerals. Now, as we told you, semiconductor is not just silicon or germanium. It has those rare earth metals, it has those small amount of critical minerals which are used, and for that we need to have supplies of those critical minerals. As we have seen that there is a supply chain restriction which has been imposed. There are many countries which are actually having those monopoly on those supplies, especially China. Even many of the countries like in Ukraine has certain supplies of certain particular minerals. So we need to make sure that the supply chain of those minerals are also ensured. Else what would happen कि अगर हमने fab unit बना भी लिया, हमने हर चीज़ कर दिया, लेकिन at the same time we need to have a supply source of those critical minerals that needs to be ensured at every point of time. Then highly water intensive. Semiconductor का जो manufacturing होता है, it is water guzzling. Water guzzling in the sense that it needs to extract water. उसके अलग अलग phases में water का usage बहुत ज़्यादा होता है, and that is very highly distilled water. तो उसमें wastage is very high because for distillation and for reverse osmosis we know that for a highest level of distillation जो wastage of water है वो बहुत ज़्यादा होता है, and that is why it is water guzzling in nature. This industry is water guzzling in nature, and that is why there could be certain protest after some time that many of the states may start, people from those states may start protesting. If you talk about the policies of the government, how this thing has been promoted, the pioneer, the flagship is India Semiconductor Mission, which is rupees 76,000 crore mission, so as to ensure end-to-end semiconductor ecosystem. Within that, we have a design linked incentive scheme for incentivizing certain startups to create our own indigenous integrated circuits, microprocessors and all this. This is as a part of design linked incentive scheme. Then PLI scheme, capital subsidy scheme for fabrication setup. For the setup of those manufacturing plant, the government of India gives subsidies up to 50% of the project costs. Then there are bilateral collaborations, as I have told you that we are having bilateral collaborations with countries like Taiwan, South Korea. We are having collaborations with even United States of America, United Kingdom. So as to make sure that we ensure that technology, import of those technologies and also the expertise in those manufacturing. Then we have industry, academia, collaboration, and this happens through Semicon India conference, where industries and academic people they interact together to know about the development which is taking place and to know about the industrial needs, about the skill sets which are required. At the same time, AICTE has approved certain curriculum for VLSI, very large scale integration IC based particular skill sets or the curriculum, because we need to make sure that our engineers are also getting trained on the things which the industry wants. नहीं तो क्या होगा ना, वो फिर skill gap हो जाएगा, and then it will add up to the supplementary skills program which have to be run, and it will delay the whole process. So that is why the government of India is ensuring that even at the skill front we are ready to go, we are ready to supply those skilled workforce to be absorbed within these fabrication units. So this was all about the semiconductor ecosystem within India. Thank you.